Trading at Schwab is now powered by Ameritrade, unlocking the power of Thinkorswim, the award-winning trading platforms loaded with features that let you dive deeper into the market. Visualize your trades in a new light on Thinkorswim desktop with robust charting and analysis tools, all while you uncover new opportunities with up-to-the-minute market news and insights. Thinkorswim is available on desktop, web, and mobile to meet you where you are. It's built by the trading obsessed to help you trade brilliantly. Learn more at schwab.com/trading.
From the Netherlands, in our virtual studios in the cloud.
And Camarillo, California, where it is sunny outside.
It is time once again for your favorite marketing show that has the word geeks in the title. It is time once again for the Marketing Geeks. And we have quite a show.
We are continuing the tradition of bringing on incredible, profound guests. This week we have another one on the show. I'm not going to tell you who it is. You probably already read the title. You probably already know, but get excited. We have a great show coming up right now.
And I've actually heard this show already in the future, and I have to tell you, it's one of my favorite shows so far of all time. And with that, we are going to bring you some techniques that you need to know to make your marketing game better than it was. How was that for?
How does this episode rank compared to like episode 175?
Oh my God, man. This is definitely in the top 5 or 10, maybe the top 15, but it is up there. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it is time once again for the Marketing Geeks. Yes.
Marketing Geeks.
It's Andros, Sturgeon, and Justin Womack. And we have a really special guest, ladies and gentlemen.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
K-pop Demon Hunters, Haja Boys Breakfast Meal and Huntrix Meal have just dropped at McDonald's. They're calling this a battle for the fans. What do you say to that, Rumi?
It's not a battle. So glad the Saja Boys could take breakfast and give our meal the rest of the day.
It is an honor to share.
No, it's our honor.
It is a larger honor.
No, really. Stop.
You can really feel the respect in this battle. Pick a meal to pick a side.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. At participating McDonald's while supplies last.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce Joseph Jaffe, and he is quite an accomplished person. He has a I'll let you tell you all about it. But he's an author of several books.
Well, we can call him Admiral Jaffe. Do you prefer Admiral Jaffe or Joseph Jaffe?
I prefer Admiral Joseph, Admiral Joe, Admiral Joseph Joe. You know, the old sales technique is I don't care what you call me as long as you call me.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah, I love it. So you're a keynote speaker. You're a 5-time author. You got a new book coming out. We want to hear about that. You're also a co-founder of the HMS Beagle. And for those of you who don't know, the HMS Beagle, of course, was Darwin's ship that he sailed around the Galapagos Islands, which is near Ecuador. I know that because I honeymooned there and went into the jungle and met up with a shaman. And,
what else do you do in Ecuador, Andros?
Ayahuasca, man. I just did
I didn't
that.
know if you're going to say it straight out, but
why not? Hey, I got nothing to hide. It was a life-changing experience. Who else gets to say that? And it was amazing. So, with that, Joseph, Admiral, please tell us, give us a rundown. Give us the elevator pitch of your resume.
Oh my God, I can't do this. Better be a very slow elevator and a lot of floors to have to climb. No, I guess I would say I am a serial entrepreneur because I'm running my 3rd company at the moment, and I'm a writer, and I've been privileged enough to be published 5 times. But that's my resume. I've worked on the client side, I've worked on the agency side. But I've worked for myself for now 17 years, and I kind of think that's just the way it's always going to be.
Yeah.
Now, it also says on your resume here that you are a rabble rouser and a troublemaker. Can you talk a little bit about that? Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think that to me, if you had to ask me who is my enemy, what is the enemy that I constantly battle against, it would be mediocrity. I mean, if we've learned anything from Marketing 101, it's all about differentiation and breaking through the clutter. And we almost kind of use those as throwaway terms, but it has become so difficult to stand out. But more importantly, it's become so difficult to stand for anything, to stand for something. And so, whether we call it, troublemaking or rabble rousing, I think we need to shake this profession up.
Yeah.
It's a big part of the motivation, behind this book. But before we get there, because this is a marketing show, and yesterday I was talking to, I was on Sirius, talking on a show that's connected to Wharton, and I was talking to a professor of marketing, and I was saying, I wrote about this in my first book in 2004, that the 4 Ps are commoditized. Segmenting, targeting, positioning. The words we use, right? We target our consumers. We brand them like cattle. Permission to treat the witness as hostile, Your Honor, and even the traditional marketing and sales funnel, which of course I turned on its head quite literally and flipped the funnel. That was created by a traveling insurance/snake oil salesman by the name of E. St. Elmo Lewis over 110 years ago. So is it any wonder that the tenure of a CMO is shrinking? Is it any wonder, that there are fewer and fewer CMO seats on the board at the moment? Is it any wonder that basically everything has been stripped away from marketing except for, guess what, advertising? So it's time to be a bit of a rabble rouser and and be provocative, not for the sake of being provocative, but I think to kind of push and challenge us to say we can do better, we should do better, otherwise we're in danger of being left behind.
I love that you're saying all this. And, on this show, we've talked a lot about how in marketing these days, you really do have to stand out from the competition. We've even talked about the campaigns that like Nike has pulled out with Colin Kaepernick, bringing him on to try to take a stand on a hot emotional topic or a hot emotion button topic. And we've also talked about concepts like blue ocean versus red ocean, where we want to create niches for ourselves where there is no other competition, like in this blue ocean, instead of swimming with the sharks where everybody's at. Instead of playing in the waters where everybody's doing the exact same thing, we have to find a way to differentiate ourselves. And if that means being provocative, if that means doing something that's outside of the norms of society, then that's what we got to do. And one last thing before I turn this over to Andros, because I know he has something to add here, is I do love that we are following up your interview with somebody from Wharton, a professor from Wharton, with the Marketing Geeks. I think that's the next logical line of succession. So that's perfect.
Well, I want to tell you, I mean, there's so much from even what you said that I could, respond to. But I'll tell you that just a little personal anecdote, which is, on the cover and on the back of the book, there are endorsements from Professor Philip Kotler, who heads up marketing at Kellogg, Philip he wrote the marketing textbook. He wrote consumer behavior that I learned my first, marketing 101 from. And one of the most amazing moments of my life, talking about being a marketing geek, was, so many years later, I'm keynoting at a seminar in Caracas in Venezuela. How many Americans, I'm a naturalized American now, but how many Americans will even get to go to Venezuela in their lifetimes, then, now, in the future? And the only other, it was seminar, 2-3 hour seminars, and the other keynoter was Professor Kotler. And it was Kotler and myself, and we actually got to hang out together and talk for an hour and a half together at like a private bar, and it was just the most amazing moment for me. And then, of course, for him to endorse my book was just tremendously humbling as well. So I like the idea of, figuring out how to fuse the old and the new, or, the past, the present, and the future. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I even talk about in Built to Suck, but as a simple framework, it's the most simplest idea, but it is so important for marketers out there. It's reject the worst of the old, and maintain the best of the old, embrace the best of the new, and reject the worst of the new. So it's kind of like so simple, but so many people are lost. They're either holding on to the status quo, and legacy like a security blanket, or, on the flip side, equally bad is they're diving headfirst like a bunch of lemmings into all of this IoT-enabled AI, chatbot drones, and they have no idea why they're doing it. And they're both losers on either side.
Yeah, this is all really interesting. I want to get into the kind of the heart of Built to Suck and kind of the things that you bring up in there. But first thing I was curious about, you were mentioning that mediocrity is something that bores you, and it me as well. And we often talk about how to not fall into the mold and how to really focus on your niche market and build a community rather than just advertise to people. But what are the trends that you see to be the biggest issues in marketing that are the most boring to you?
Did you say boring?
Yeah, like boring and just mediocre.
What's boring for me is, no, I love the question. Boring for me is trying to teach an old dog new tricks. Or boring for me is the ability to teach an old dog old tricks, right? Boring is in many respects is, diving into the whole programmatic and auction desks and whatever the hell they're doing these days, just trying to automate the process and just, what do you call it? Like kind of put lipstick on a pig, or the short, the Band-Aid solution to a gaping, hemorrhaging wound. That's boring to me. What's exciting to me is and one of the pillars in Built to Suck is this: it's digital disruption. Digital was always meant to disrupt. Digital was meant to be a game changer. It was meant to be able to completely rethink and transform the ways that we went to market and did business. I still talk about maybe the most profound change in our lifetimes as marketers was search. The fact that we could move from push to pull, that was incredible. And so that to me is boring. Like, I'm not afraid of measurability. I'm not afraid of accountability. In fact, I love the idea of metrics. I often say, we've got to, we need new metrics, right? We need to be like, I love the ability to invent new metrics that can actually tell a better story rather than try and, measure what we're doing using old, staid and outdated mechanisms, like even thinking about reach, or engagement. What the hell? Like, we need to be able to inspire or provoke change, action, intent, trial, referrals. We've got to be thinking smarter about how to innovate every part of this process.
That's some great points there, but I always wanted to say, so in terms of the metrics that you're talking about, I just came back from a digital marketing conference, Traffic and Conversions, this last week, and they hammered on a couple different points. So you kind of mentioned how you were kind of getting bored with like the staleness of automation, and they hammered on this at the conference, that automation in its current form is dying. And in its place is a more personalized. There's a ton more personalization that's being added into the automation to make it seem less generic. I think the general market is no longer responding to just a merge form that says hi first name. That no longer means what it meant 15 years ago, when it felt like it was actually kind of special to have someone say your first name in an email. It means nothing these days. And if you're not speaking directly to someone's need, so if you're not segmenting your email list, if you're not segmenting down to a specific need and specific problem, then you're totally missing the boat. And so I could see how, like, when you were talking about just the automation part, I see that there. Also, in terms of metrics, metrics don't do justice to a number of different things. I mean, if we just followed metrics alone, people wouldn't really use social media marketing very much, because it's tough to justify the time cost versus the reward from pure metrics alone, because it's kind of, there are no real metrics that can that measure properly exactly what's going on with social media marketing.
No, so
those are just a couple points I wanted to add.
No, again, like a fantastic synopsis, because, for example, thinking about the difference between influence and popularity is a perfect way to frame that from a social media standpoint. When we are measuring what we do online and in social based on earned media and retweets and and friends, fans, and followers, and we're not actually recognizing the influence that comes from true engagement and the credibility associated with certain people that may not have Jenner or Kardashian-like numbers as well. It's a classic example of how, Twitter and so many of these platforms have just become, they've just become broadcast platforms, and it's all about numbers. It's all about reach. And that's the kind of point that I was making, right? Teaching an old dog new tricks, as opposed to truly being able to think about how to create an authentic voice and an authentic platform, on these certain hubs.
Yeah. So what do you like based on that? What do you see the methodology is really like? If you were like in the way that you would run a campaign, for instance, for a company that has no idea what they're doing, what would be the type of thing that you would recommend someone do to really be innovative and stay away from the things that people are not paying attention to?
Yeah, so when you said if I was working for a company that had no idea what they were doing, so you've now narrowed it down to 99.9% of the companies as well. Could you be more?
Pretty much. That's my clients too.
Could you be more specific? No, I mean, the thing is, I spoke about this idea of authentic voice, but it's also being able to like really define the role for marketing, right? And the role of these various, hubs as well, even from a content standpoint, the ability to, I would advise slow burn, right? Versus raging forest fire, the ability to create that equity over time, that base over time, that trust and rapport, over time, and also be able to then, overlay that authentic voice, which is, oh, wait a second, we're not just telling the same story across 25 different syndicated channels or platforms. There are different ones as well. But, we've been talking obviously about digital, and social as well. I would talk about, again, when you look at these 4 pillars, as I wrote about in Built to Suck, the one that I say, you cannot, it's not an optional extra to say, well, we delivered against the other 3, but this one we didn't do. It's customer obsession, right? It's retention as the new acquisition. It's being able to truly create that inside out approach to using existing customers to gain new ones. That is the lifeblood of any company, from a startup, in terms of tapping into innovators and early adopters and what I call first customers or super consumers, all the way to established legacy companies that somehow forget, where they've come from and forget about their most loyal customers. That would be the starting point. And everything from there, is just gravy when you start to think about, we are corporations, those clueless companies, they're obsessed on the wrong thing. They're obsessed on what I call prostitutes and strangers, right? A stranger is a first-time buyer, and a prostitute is a promiscuous buyer, a switcher. We've got to completely change the way we think about how we do business.
I totally agree with you. And it's funny because I've been talking about this for months now in terms of really, emphasizing lifetime customer value, number one. And number two is getting companies to actually allocate a portion of their marketing budget towards their existing client base and actually nurturing and taking care of the ones that are already there so that they are more likely to both generate referrals or to come back and do more business with their existing companies. So one of the things that I have kind of taken on is the idea that I'll actually send physical cards, physical gifts to my existing clients. And the response has been pretty unbelievable because not only do I get positive praise for doing it, but they'll actually post pictures of the gift on social media, and it spreads a lot of positive buzz for a low price. So I think like in the new kind of marketing economy, it's like finding these opportunities where you can get kind of a nice return for a low investment. Like I could spend $20 on a gift, get somebody to post on their profile for social media, and spread positive word of mouth. I think there's a lot of opportunities like that exist that people are totally missing out on because they're so focused on doing that grind for new customers only, kind of even to the point where they'll ignore their existing customers because all they think about is acquiring more and more and more without taking care of the ones they already have.
Yeah, obviously completely agree with you. And, the example that I've been using lately, just I think 2 weeks ago, maybe even as recent as that, Payless announced that they were going out of business maybe 3 weeks ago. And, the example that I use specifically with Payless is they created this fake store, this pop-up store called Paylessi or Palessi, whatever, some Italian name. And they got all influencers involved. And, the whole experiment was to see how much people would pay for $20 shoes. And some people came in, they paid $200 and $300 and even $400, and they commented on the craftsmanship and the the design and the style and the exclusivity. And 2 months later, Payless went out of business. And the point was, instead of trying to get people to pay $400 for $20 pair of shoes, they couldn't figure out how to get more people to buy $20 shoes. And specifically with respect to their own customer base, you've got to imagine that if you are a Payless loyal customer, the ability to really kind of cash in on this find, on this quality, they never were. Clearly, they weren't able to exploit that, but more importantly, to use those existing customers to gain new ones. Because I just want to say one thing, which is, I created this like Maslowian hierarchy about retention. And the problem is that when you say the word retention or, loyalty or whatever to a company, they think about three things on the lowest end of that, pecking order. They think of churn and attrition. That's number one. They think of competitive conquesting, and they think of cross-sell and upsell. All three of those are corporate-centric. Not one of them is customer-centric. The next three that I introduced was, content creation, joining the conversation, then what I call commendations, referrals ultimately, but eventually leading up to self-actualization in the sense that these are customers who either are buying stock or are given stock. They feel like they are part of the company. Even if they don't actually own stock, they are absolutely, embedded in the organization. They feel like they have a vested interest. That's when you see the kind of voice of the customer and customers themselves becoming part of that R&D and innovation cycle. That's where we need to be getting to. Instead of just trying to get more acquisition.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And this actually harks back. The person that actually summed this up the best for me was Walt Disney, who said that the best thing you could ever do to be successful is to create an experience so wonderful that people come back again and again and bring their friends. And it's really catering to that loyal fan base and creating a storyline, if you will, that a company can then produce so people can be involved in it. And this is something that I preach all the time with the clients that I serve is this idea of that you have to move away from just making your product known and putting it out there and advertising to creating a storyline that people can follow And because we live in a day and age where Netflix is the primary form of entertainment, and it's about the binge watching. And on some level, brands need to create content that people can binge watch, or at least be episodic. I mean, every single successful movie franchise out there is all just giant episodes of something, right? So on some level, I think that the advertising and the type of content that you create as a company has to follow suit.
Yeah, totally. And again, the simplicity and the elegance of what Walt Disney said, because he said many things like, if you can dream it, you can do it, which has always been one of my personal and professional mantras. But this idea of just, if you can get, anybody let's put it this way, it's a better way to describe it when you think about like fast food or McDonald's, etc. You can get everyone in the world to try your product once and emphasize the word once and once only, right? So if the product isn't great, if the experience isn't great, if the service isn't great, if the continuity and the follow-up and follow-through isn't great, they're not going to come back again. And most importantly, they're not going to talk about it. They're not going to recommend it. And so that's why you have this obsession on acquisition, because it's like a sieve. As quickly as you acquire customers in the one hand, you lose them in the other hand. And the only way to create a semblance of normalcy or status quo is just to keep on filling that traditional funnel, instead of being able to really serve and invest in the flip funnel.
So let's talk about the book.
Let's get into a little.
Go ahead, Andros.
Yeah. So let's talk about the book. Because I'm curious about give us like I want to know kind of like what was the impetus to write the book? Like, why did you decide this book needed to be written?
And the title. I want to know the genesis of the title.
The title. Yeah. Yeah, and then tell us a little bit about like what the breakdown of like what your thesis is within the book itself.
So, I always like to ask the question, to what end, right? So when I wrote Join the Conversation, I said, like, to what end? Like, with whom? Like, which conversations should we join? Which people should we be having conversations with? And the answer was obvious: your customer. So in this particular case, when you look at marketing, which is my craft, my profession, yours as well, I see to what end. Where is marketing heading? Marketing is heading down a dead end, but more importantly, the brands that marketing ultimately has built and served, brands are dying, or changing, I should say. The way that we build brands is changing. But that ladders up to an even bigger point, which is that corporations themselves are dying. And we'll talk about that in a minute in terms of that thesis. You asked about the title. So Jay Chiat from TBWA Chi Day, he once said, "Let's see how big we get before we go bad," right? Let's see how big we get before we suck. So different versions of that statement have been shared. And that was like my inspiration, right? And I thought to myself, you know what? Companies today are not built to last. They're built to suck. And I kind of put those two ideas together. And Built to Suck was really born. And I'll preempt a follow-up question in case you were going to ask it, which is, well, why didn't I call the book, Built to Fail, or something like that? And my feeling is, failure is too good for corporations. Failure is actually one of the best parts of the startup world. You show me a startup founder or entrepreneur that hasn't failed 1,000 times today, probably, or been told no, 1,000 times. Failure, the pivot, the art of the pivot. That's the cost of doing business. That's the essence of what it is to be part of this, entrepreneurial revolution, which I talk about. And so, I kind of looked at it and I was like, you know what? 51. I went to the ANA Masters of Marketing conference last year, and the whole theme was about returning to growth. And yet the entire conference opened up with a data point, which is 51% of Fortune 500 companies have had declining revenues over the past 3 years on average. So where is there's no growth. What's happening to these companies? Well, I'll tell you what's happening. The average Fortune 500 company, their lifespan has dropped from 75 to 15 years in just 50 years. I actually went out and I started compiling what I think is I don't think anyone has put together this amount of empirical data about the demise of the corporation. And then, obviously back that up with a lot of anecdotal data, which is the easiest thing in the world, right? Sears, Toys R Us, BlackBerry, Kodak, Blockbuster, Payless, etc. And so that became the genesis for recognizing that, the business model of business is broken. The very thing that helped these multinational, these global brands grow, which was size, scale, economies of scale, efficiencies of scale, the whole concept of being a global corporation with all this resources and networks around the world, that is the very albatross right now around its neck that is suffocating it. It is because of the overhead, the political dysfunctional, aspects of the way that they do business, the constant reorgs, what I call death by 1,000 budget cuts. These companies have become conservative. They've lost their competitive edge. They're slowing down when the world is speeding up. And when you kind of recognize that, is this even a marketing conversation anymore? No, it's a business conversation. It's about continuity. It's about evolution. It's about change. It's about survival. And I wanted to ladder up to this idea because once you're having a conversation at that level, that's when you can start to figure out, is there a role for marketing, and what does that role look like?
Now, would you say that like the way that corporations are structured in the United States, is that also contributing to the problem? Because we're in a world where corporations are required by law, fiduciary duty to oblige the shareholders and reach profit no matter what. But because of that, they can't take on these longer term strategies. From a marketing standpoint, in order to take on longer term strategies, you have to invest, knowing that you're not going to get an immediate return on investment. Is that also part of the problem here? Because to me, it makes a lot of sense that would be a part of why the lifespan of these companies no longer live as long, is because they're not setting groundwork that'll last for long periods of time. They're living for short-term profits. Everything is in the short term. Nothing that they're doing is for long term. Would you say that makes sense?
My response to that would be, cry me a river. Like, too bad, tough luck. Kind of like stop crying, stop moaning. I, not to you obviously, but to them. I kind of expand on what you're just talking about now, and I refer to the coming, although one might argue it's already here, the corporate apocalypse. And just like an apocalyptic, kind of premonition, there are 4 horsemen, and the first horseman is absolutely, size, which we've spoken about. The second one is age. 100 years of history, in my opinion, is a liability, not an asset anymore. It almost indicates a certain degree of legacy and incumbency and political dysfunction. And I actually say that, for me, there is a cutoff. I'm calling it millennial companies and younger, so born after 1980. But even that is a stay of execution. I'll come to the third one last because that's the one that you kind of alluded to. The fourth one is culture. And it specifically is about a culture of change, a culture of inclusivity, a culture of failure or tolerating failure. Also a culture of being able to adapt to new work practices in terms of the gig economy, et cetera, et cetera. But the third one is being a public company. And I think that's kind of the kiss of death, because by being a public company, there is we have STDs. This is a CTD. This is a corporate transmitted disease.
Yeah.
And that disease is short-termitis.
New. I haven't heard that.
That's good.
Right. It's short-termitis.
Yeah.
So short-termitis, it's infectious, and it is chronic and it is debilitating. And the problem is, and look,
it itches.
Oh yeah. And there's a certain rash. I don't even know if there is a cream to help it. But I will say one thing, which is, here's the thing. We need long-term thinking. What we don't need is long-term planning. We don't need elongated planning cycles. What we need are 3-month, planning cycles, but we desperately need, big thinking. I don't even want to call it big ideas, but the big, hairy, audacious goal. We've got to be able to change the game. Otherwise, we're absolutely, going to be left behind.
Yeah. Now, this brings up a few interesting points for me because number one, we live in a day and age where a tiny group of people, like 5 or 6 people, can just completely disrupt a huge corporation that is worth billions of dollars within a few months, even depending on the type of product they introduce. And so the rise of like smaller companies disrupting larger organizations, it's mind-boggling. And you add in automation, and people aren't even ready for what's about to happen. So let me ask you this question: if you were a smaller startup wanting to kind of get into a situation where you can disrupt a larger competitor who's dealing with these types of issues that are slowing them down, what would be the type of thing that you would advise a company to do, not only from their marketing perspective, but also from their culture perspective, which you hit on a huge point that that interests me greatly, which is corporate culture and how corporate cultures need to change to kind of get new talent and recruit new talent, and some of them are failing. So what would be your advice to a company that is an older company or just trying to figure out how to do it well or better?
So the first answer, which is actually the prelude to the 4 pillars, which again are digital disruption, customer obsession, talent resurrection, and corporate citizenship, is this idea of embrace your heresy, to define your legacy. And what that really means is, embrace your deepest, darkest fears. And from that kind of almost cathartic moment comes rebirth and comes reinvention and transformation. Okay, so what does that mean? There are about 10 of these heresies. The ultimate one is are you prepared to put yourself out of business? So let me make that real practical. If the magazine business all the way back when, Bride or Modern Bride magazine, I talk about them in the book. I went down to Jamaica, spoke at one of their big events. They said, listen, bring it on, bring your A game, Joe. Tell us what we need to hear. Tell us the truth. But by the way, please be very sensitive not to upset the publishers, because they really, really kind of respect their magazine. And, so just recognize that, respect the magazine, and try not to be too much of a booster with respect to digital. And of course, I ignored them and basically said to them, I said, please take this advice. Treat your digital, your online, property the same way, not better, not worse, just the same way that you treat your magazine. Have 2 horses in the game. And I think they basically kind of had security escort me out. It was a very lonely little luau on the beach that night. But of course.
And what year was this?
This was 2005, I want to say, 2004.
Okay, very prophetic words, I'm sure. Yeah. So I'm sure they regretted it, but they probably were escorted out harshly.
Both are gone, right? Both, one, and now the other one has been sold off as well, which is, of course, ridiculous when you think about it, because you know what? When last I checked, people are still getting married. Women are still getting married. There are still brides. And, of course, something like Instagram is great, but magazines serve, especially for something so niche, and so targeted and focused, makes sense. But going back to the heresies, there are a whole bunch of them. Like, what if you gave away your product for free and still no one wanted it? That's the magazine business or the newspaper business. What if you fired yourself? What if you slaughtered the cash cow? When Netflix shipped their billionth DVD, they shut it down and they moved completely all into streaming. So that's the first idea. And from there comes this idea of change the business you're in. So one of the kind of stakes in the ground is, if you describe yourself in 10 years' time the way you did 10 years ago, you're dead. It's not even up for debate as well. And look, and again, there are examples, right? Not Netflix, but Tesla describes themselves as a software company. Nike is a service company. Toyota or Ford describe themselves today as mobility companies. These aren't just like little, nuanced copywriting that the agency came up with. They really are building or trying to change their business. And the ultimate one is IBM, right? IBM went from Big Blue to big data. They went from mainframes. You could not get more durable and tangible than a mainframe to Watson.
Yeah.
So, if that kind of transformation can occur, anything's possible.
So it's really a matter, and this is something that I always preach as well, is this idea of reinvention and stretching yourself, reinventing yourself and disrupting yourself. In fact, one of the principles that I live by personally is always try and disrupt yourself, because people don't like seeing the rabbit pulled out of the hat too many times, right? We want to see something new, we want to see something innovative, and the other thing that you hit upon was authenticity. The trend that I see globally, and this gets into a much deeper conversation with the rise of nationalism and the popularity of individual number one as president, and why he became as popular as he did, and why he's able to keep a 42% approval rating, is because he does what you were saying: play to the base, play to the demographic that loves you most, but also keep. He reinvents the game, but he also represented something else, which was this idea of being something completely so different from this ancient sort of mentality and this structure that had existed for hundreds of years. And people want disruption, but they also want authenticity. And speaking your truth, or saying that you speak what's on your mind, is often mistaken for authenticity. The two aren't the same. But people know how to play that, right? So and then you brought up one other thing, which I found was very interesting, which is this idea of just expose your dark secrets, like just be authentic about who you are and what you are, right? And that's one of the biggest issues that I think people have, which is, as the saying goes, people commit felonies to cover up misdemeanors, but rather than just, in fact, I just before you came on, I've
never heard that saying.
Oh yeah, it's well, you're going to hear it a lot more, believe me.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's
but
true.
one of the things that I was joking with Justin about is, just before the show started and you came on, I got an email that was spoofed from me, and it was an email that said that someone had hacked into my account and had recorded the websites I went to and used and logged my passwords. So now they know, they have a video of me going to, quote, certain websites, and they're going to send it to my contacts if I don't give them $1,000.
I tell you, Andros, I told you, anyone can spoof an email. I'm like, I'll spoof an email. Give me 5 minutes.
But what's funny is, like, I'm just thinking, like, you know what? Go ahead and send that email to people. Like, so what? They're going to, like, who cares?
Well, first of all,
everybody already knows.
First of all, it's all true because I was the person who hacked you. But anyway, whatever.
You're not getting $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, man.
I knew it was you. I knew it.
But wait a second. Hold on. I take it back. But okay, so you again said some like really incredible things there as well. And so first of all, I mean, going back to individual number one, thing about authenticity is authenticity doesn't have to be good, right? You can be authentically bad and authentically good.
This is true.
And it's like, it's funny how when we talk about authenticity in marketing and business, it's always meant to be like altruistic. It doesn't have to be. It's actually quite like, it's incredible because I realized I actually did a case study after I published, after Zero was published, that the Trump case study is zero to a T. Zealots, entrepreneurship, retention, and owned assets. I mean, he is the world's first direct-to-consumer president, and the way that he dialed into the E of entrepreneurship, right, which is not just running on a platform of being a businessman, but the use of Twitter was enough to give him the election. And the O of owned assets, right? Sometimes it was Trump Steaks and Trump University, but most of the time it was he became his own celebrity. And, at a time when Hillary was using borrowed interest, in the form of Beyonce or Gaga or whatever the case may be, I kind of joke that, when Kid Rock is basically as good as it gets in terms of celebrities that will endorse you,
who will perform
or
for you?
Scott Baio, you got no choice but to kind of, be standing in front of your, standing in front of your jet. But the amount of free impressions.
Don't forget about Anthony Sabato Jr.
They're one or two, and Nugent and Ted Nugent. But the other thing is, just to bring it back, is one thing I said in the book, and it's a really controversial point, I think, is that I talk about, like, if the corporation were a civilization, an empire, Ottoman, Ming, Roman, Byzantine. I've got a chart that shows 5,000 years of history. It too will go that way, because no civilization or empire has been able to cheat the sands of time. Nazi Germany is on that, and at the bottom right is America. So brand America or corporate America or empire America, how sure are we, and certain are we, that we will be the greatest nation in the world, in the history of the world, until the end of time? And the one thing that I actually say is, maybe America should embrace, and embrace doesn't mean love it, it just means accept its heresy, which just might be racism. And that's that's a pretty, exposed nerve to have to touch. But it's about time, I feel, that we all have to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, we need to figure out a way to move forward, because we are constantly being dragged into and dragged back and living in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And I fully agree with you that it's one of those things where the conversation is either racism exists or we're past it. And I think that there is, just in any culture, whether it's a business culture or a governmental culture, there is slight systemic racism that really does exist. And some people will argue that no, it's not, but we are a tribalistic society, and this is, this helps us with marketing too, because you can form tribes that people will gravitate towards you. We want something new. We want something that's unique and fresh. But I feel that there's, this is a very interesting subject that people just freak out about. But until we can all sit down together and really look at each other and go, okay, I have my own prejudices about these particular things, but instead of saying, well, I'm going to block these people from Facebook, I try to engage in conversations with people and one of my favorite techniques is to just say, well, tell me more about that, because you can bring people out, and eventually they will usually find out how dumb their ideas actually are. But you're right about this, especially living here in the Netherlands, seeing the difference between America and some of the countries here in the European Union. I got to tell you, there are some definite things that America can grow from, and I have my own list of those things.
Yeah,
but
no, I was just going to say, this kind of brings us back to, corporate citizenship, which is the fourth pillar, which is this idea of, if you want to do good, you have to be good. And the problem is that corporations are not good. They're in fact evil. And so part of this idea is, this does come back to, you alluded to Nike with Colin Kaepernick, and I do mention that, in Built to Suck. But, this is a brand, a company with a conscience that has a point of view, that and express that point of view. And we're seeing increasingly so, not profoundly, but we are seeing companies that are saying, this is what we stand for, and we're going to lead with that. And it's not just about giving to charity. It's about actually, being, that's why I call it corporate citizenship. Be a citizen of the world, because ultimately if you want to serve and sell to that world, well, you need to be a citizen first.
It used to be that, taking a stand on an issue was a big no-no for corporate culture. I mean, that was just the way it was. And up until recently, I mean, we really hadn't seen companies take political stands or take stands on controversial issues. And so seeing someone like Nike, who's like, such a major company in the US, take a stand like that and actually put out a controversial figure out on there as their main cover boy was kind of a big turning point, I think, in the way that advertising is handled. And what we've talked about before is that, so when you do this, and we've also talked about the Gillette commercial where they took on toxic masculinity in the Gillette commercial also. We've talked about how when you do these kind of things, you do alienate a certain segment of your population. You might even cause a boycott. But I mean, really, what does a boycott do often but give you free media?
Right.
You get extra media attention sometimes when you have a boycott and you're actually getting additional free advertising. But beyond that, you're also growing your relationships deeper with your core clients. So by taking a stand, you might alienate some people, but the ones that are united with that message become a deeper part of your tribe.
Yeah, and
so on that basis, it makes sense.
Yeah, well,
it's something that I've definitely brought up before, which is that if a corporation, according to the laws of the United States, if a corporation is a person, then it's like raising a child. Like, would you tell your child, like, look, your job is to go out and make as much money as possible, and it doesn't matter who you screw over in the process? If we were really to play Monopoly, teach our children Monopoly in a way that was realistic, the rules would be, if you have the most money, you can instantly change the rules of the game so you can make more money, right? That would be, and you could just be like, well,
is it any wonder why they say that psychopaths are running companies too? Like they say, like a good chunk of sociopaths in the U.S. are CEOs,
sycophants, sociopaths, enablers, nepotism. There's a lot of that stuff. I just want to say one thing. Hold that thought, guys, because there's a point that we were talking about earlier. You mentioned Gillette. This is a company that spent $5 million plus on a Super Bowl commercial. That's just the media cost, let alone the production and the agency fees, to tell us basically that they were donating $1 million over 3 years, like $1 million per year, to basically help clueless men become less clueless. You're going to need a lot more than $1 million. So there's something wrong when you have to spend $5 million to advertise that you're giving away $1 million.
Which is kind of common practice, though.
You shouldn't have to advertise, how good you are and how great you are. You should just be good. And that's kind of the point. That's the point.
Yeah. Well, that is a great point. Sometimes you have to adapt to the situation, even if things are becoming disruptive. Like, for instance, in this week's... That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is time for the Sex Robot Report. Yeah.
We warned you.
This is the most amazing part of our show. Give me horn. Oh, yeah. Here we are once again. This story is from thesun.co.uk. So talking about a person who, if you can't beat them, join them, or at least disrupt yourself, as I was saying. This to me has the absolute best headline I think I've read all year. Sex Terminator, quote, porn star, spent £380,000 on plastic surgery to become a, quote, living sex robot, and says real sex robots can't compete. So I just like that title because it has Terminator, porn star, £380,000, sex robot, all in the same headline. So that is a good one. Sybil Stallone has referred to herself as the, quote, the sex Terminator, and now works in a legal brothel near Las Vegas. She's undergone numerous surgeries to transform herself into a living sex doll, and says that sex robots have no chance of matching her. So I guess what the situation is, she was losing clients to actual sex robots. So
this is the first. This is the first part of the singularity where we merge with machines. She is the first.
Yeah. So the question that I want to know is, since she augmented her breasts, do they count as sex robot breasts, or do they count as enhancements like for humans? I don't know.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah. Admiral, do you have any thoughts on this matter?
I'm absolutely, for the first time in my life, I have nothing to say. And the cat's got my tongue. Sorry, the bot's got my tongue.
I love that, but
you choose to plead the fifth.
But as the saying goes, a human with robotic arms is awesome, but a robot with human arms is terrifying. And with that,
another great saying that I've never heard of.
Yeah, well, I got a million of them. With that, we close out, thankfully, this edition of the Sex Robot Report.
The number one sex robot report in all of podcasting.
Can
I just say that I would recommend people subscribe to this podcast specifically for that segment.
We're going to put that on our testimonial reel.
You know what? It's our clickbait. It's all we got. So that's why, Joseph, you gotta tell 500 of your closest friends about us, because that's how we grow. But with that, tell us. Okay, give us a breakdown. Where can we find you? Tell me where you're going to be next. Tell us about the book, when it's available. Give us the rundown.
So the next thing for me and the book is everything is converging on Austin, Texas. So I'll be heading down to South by Southwest and doing a number of book-related activities. So I'm excited about that. The book is available for pre-order on Amazon and will become officially available, I think, around about March 19th, March 20th. And so those are the two next things. I'm actually going to be in Belgium in May.
No way.
So maybe
we
can.
Yeah,
dude, you got to come see me. You got to come see me. We got to hang out. Yeah,
we got to talk about it. Or you can take a little drive to Brussels. I'll give you all the details.
Yeah, it's not too far from me.
And I got to tell you, I'm really excited about this. I mean, I feel that the message so far. I've just been really, really humbled by the feedback that I've received, the response that I've received. Some of the endorsements at the back of the book, it was great because for me, it was eclectic in the sense you had former CMO of Procter & Gamble, Jim Stengel. You had the head of the Association of National Advertisers, one of my role models, Rashad Tabakawala, Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank, Douglas Rushkoff, who is decidedly anti-corporate, which I loved. And then, one of my personal favorites was Chris Burgrave, who used to be the CMO of AB InBev. And he basically he said, Jaffe may appear to be the head sparrow of paranoia. And I turned around to him and I was like, Chris, the head sparrow, for those of you that don't watch Game of Thrones, you won't know what we're talking about. But for those of you that do, I said to him, that he got nuked with wildfire. Him and all of his disciples were killed. He said, well, that's the price of being a heretic, Joe. But then thankfully, he says he might appear to be, but in fact, he's Andy Grove 2.0. So, I love that idea.
I just love that you're geeky enough to throw in a Game of Thrones reference. That's
good stuff.
That's pretty awesome.
Now, is the book available on Audible, or is it just hardcover? Is it paperback? How is it being released?
It's Kindle and it's hardcover for now. I do love the form of a hardcover book. I also think it can be a lethal weapon if you throw it hard enough at someone or a doorstop. On my agenda is to record the actual audiobook. I feel, a lot of people say to me that, when they read my books, it's as if they can hear my voice. It's as if I'm talking to them because I write in a very unique conversational way. And so I figured it has to be my voice to narrate my book. I just have to find the time to lock myself somewhere, up somewhere quiet and then record about 10 hours of
Well, you got a great voice, man.
We had a guest on last week.
Thank you.
We had a guest on last week, Josh Tickell, who what did he say? He was 30 or 40 hours he spent recording his book to get it on Audible. So it was more than 10.
Yeah, but this guy's a pro.
I intend to make many mistakes.
Yeah. So
I intend to make many, many mistakes and many expletives every time I make a mistake.
So before we close out, I got the big level question I have for you, because you're a bit of a futurist, a bit of a disruptor. Tell me, what do you see? Where do you see the trends going? What do you see the next 10 years being like, as far as how corporations need to deal with their marketing and their culture, and where do you see it moving towards?
Well, it's funny because, and not to, I decidedly don't like the term futurist, because I often say that, the thing about futurists is they never tell you all the times they were wrong, but they keep reminding you about the one time that they were right. I mean,
that's right, Andros.
My feeling is I typically look at a 12 to 18 month time frame. The Gretzky quote of skating to where the puck is going to be. But I'll tell you something that when I look at my previous books, often people might say that, you were ahead of your time. Well, I don't think I'm ahead of my time this time. I actually see, I say to people, I think we're at a moment in time where we're watching this happen, unfold in front of us. The change, the disruption, the volatility. We discuss politics today. We think of consumerism. We think about the world, the planet, global war, like everything coming together. It seems like it's just all converging at the same time. And so the question is, what side of history do we want to be recorded on? What side of history do we want to become a part of? Are we prepared to act? Are we prepared to take our fate into our own hands, or have somebody else dictate that fate for us? So, for me, it's all hands on deck. That's why I founded the HMS Beagle with the former CEO of J. Walter Thompson, Lynn Power. We're all in the survival business nowadays. So right now it's coming down to, developing those survival plans and developing those growth plans. And I think that's the kind of the key point here, which is companies have got to return to growth. But I'm not talking about fake growth or bought growth, the M&A growth, the private equity growth. I'm talking about customer-driven, honest, organic, authentic growth. So that's where I'm focused on, rather than look at a tactic, rather than look at a technology, because, there are just so many of them. It is about being able to focus right now on that kind of, that journey or that voyage to survival and ultimately thrival. So that's how I look at it.
I love it. Anything else you want to add before we close out the show?
Well, I got one last question, because we have to do a one geek segment here. Are you going to see Captain Marvel this weekend? That's my question.
Oh. I wish I was, but I'm going to be in South by Southwest, so I'm not going to be able to. And I think Austin is still, as they say, keep Austin weird. I think it's still hard to actually find mainstream anything in Austin, which is kind of what I love about it.
Yeah.
So
well, maybe you'll find Samuel L. Jackson there or someone, though. You might find the stars.
You know what? I've been lucky enough. I actually, in the very first two or three pages of the book, I have a photo of Guillermo and myself, Guillermo from Jimmy Kimmel.
All right.
I bumped into him running, and I stopped him. I was like, Guillermo, and he was like so awesome. And he was, he recorded a little video plug for my blog, etc. So trust me, the geek, the geek factor is really high. The force is strong with me, but I'm going to have to focus on Captain Marvel when I get back.
Well, we'll let you. But will you be on the show again? Because this was a fantastic hour. I don't feel like we even scratched the surface.
100%. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it, awesome. And anytime you want me back, consider it done.
All right, Admiral Joseph Jaffe, everybody, and Admiral, and with that, we close out.
Permission to come aboard.
Another permission granted.
Fabulous episode of the Marketing Geeks. I hope that you learned a lot. If you have any questions, if you want to help us out, please leave a 5-star review. Share this with 500 of your closest friends. Tell people how great you are and how great we are.
Yes.
And
be like Be like our donors. I want to give some shout outs right now. Let's get some shout outs. Iris Garretts, Westine Otto, Islam Ahmed, and Jessica Wynn. I want to give shout outs to our newest donors of the show right now. All of them are donating $4.99 to the show, and they are able to get recordings of all of our webinars as a result. So if you too want to be a new donor and get the webinar recordings, donate to the show.
Yeah,
we love you.
Please, or just leave a 5-star review and share it. But thank you so much, Admiral Joseph Jaffe. You can find him, get his new book, and we'll leave some links.
We'll have the link in the show description. So we'll have a link for the book in the show description.
That's right. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, from our virtual studios globally, this has been